Hello, my name is Aram Collier. I'm the head of programming at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. I hope you enjoyed our presentation of AKA Don Bonus. If you, just a reminder, if you're watching live from CineSend and want to ask our guests questions, please send it through the CineSend chat. There is a bar at the top where you can enter your question. If you're on a phone, the chat is on the bottom. All your comments and questions are subject to our code of conduct, so realasian.com/code of conduct if you want to check that out. And if you want to be part of our discussion online, you can join the Real Asian Film Forum, so realasian.com/film forum. For this Q&A, I'm really excited to have a discussion with director Spencer Nakasako and Miko Rivereza, whose participation was made possible with support from the CBC. But first, I'd like to bring on one of our sponsors. Professor Elizabeth Wajaya will speak a little bit about the Asian Institute and the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. Professor Elizabeth Wajaya works at the intersection of cinema, philosophy, and area studies. She is especially interested in the material and symbolic entanglements between East Asia and Southeast Asian cinema. She's an assistant professor of East Asian Cinema, Department of Visual Studies at University of Toronto, Mississauga, and the director of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies and the Asian Institute. So Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. So on behalf of the Asian Institute and the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, I'd like to thank Real Asian for their very thoughtful and diverse programming. And we're very proud to have the opportunity to support this masterclass on AKA Don Bonus. So many of the themes in the film on diasporic generations, belonging, and creative agency remain urgently pertinent today. And I'm personally very eager to learn more about this pioneering work and its legacies from the moderator, Aram, and also the speakers, Spencer and Miko, today. And I look forward to an exciting discussion.
All right, thank you. AKA Don Bonus is a film from 1995, and it's a landmark film and thoroughly part of the Asian American film canon. Amongst its many accolades is a National Emmy Award for documentary, and it's screened at the Berlin Film Festival. AKA Don Bonus was on the vanguard of the video diary format, where consumer-level technology could be used to give access to news stories and perspectives. We're pleased to be showing it for the first time on a large scale across Canada. Upon the film's 25th anniversary, we take an opportunity to look back at the film, its craft, and its resonance with today, which we'll do in a conversation with Spencer and Miko. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Spencer. Hi, Spencer.
Hey, how you doing?
So where are you joining us from today?
San Francisco.
All right.
Yeah. Couple blocks from your house.
Yeah, that's right. Is it foggy?
Raining. We need the rain bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
After all the fires. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to cover with this film. There's so much history behind it, and then also want to get to our conversation with Miko too. So I just want to put the film in a little bit of context first. And so this is part of a trilogy that you did with Southeast Asian youth through lots of work in the community. And on the Real Asian side, this was a film that came out before Real Asian existed. But the second and third parts of that trilogy. So the second film was Kelly Loves Tony, showed at Real Asian in 1998, and that's a still from the film Kelly Loves Tony. And then the third part of this trilogy, Refugee, was shown at Real Asian in 2003. But again, AKA Don Bonus came out in 1995, and Real Asian didn't exist yet. So I think another thing that wasn't really part of the Asian American film landscape was a focus on Southeast Asian stories. And so, you had worked with Vietnamese community maybe 10 or 15 years earlier on Monterey's Boat People, but maybe you can talk about your community involvement with the Vietnamese Youth Development Center, because that's very much a part of how AKA Don Bonus started.
Right. Okay. Well, first, thanks for having me. I mean, it's it's a shocker in some ways that people are still watching this because it's been 25 years, and so it's super nice to kind of get it screened again, and it's also, I'm excited to kind of be here with Miko because I don't really pretend to have a pulse on what's going on today, so I'm really looking forward to him providing that perspective. I'm interested in today, but I'm out of it in terms of what's actually happening today. It's interesting. I'm just looking here and it says Don Bonus Masterclass, and I hope people aren't disappointed. It's going to be working class. My work is about the work. It's rather than it's always been sort of putting my nose to the grindstone and relying on others. And I think that when you mentioned my early work, my first film was called Monterey's Boat People, and it was about the fishing crisis between the Vietnamese fishermen and local fishermen in Monterey, California. And I never went to film school, and what was a real advantage was that actually I was born and raised in Monterey. This was my hometown. My partner, who I worked on it with, Vince DiGirolamo, was my high school buddy. You know what I mean? And we ended up going to Cal together. His family was firmly entrenched in the fishing industry. They owned restaurant, they owned a distribution system, and they also owned fishing boats. Not his specific family, but his extended family. So one of the things that I realized early on was access was everything. You could be a skilled, in other words, having that access to people and their stories overcame skill, you know what I mean, or genius level. So that advantage of having access to Vince's family, we also traced the fishing. We from the Asian perspective, that was like I had all these contacts from my family. So one of the things that I kind of learned early on was that it was impossible to do any kind of story without trust or without the okay. You know what I'm saying? Where with the relationship with the Vietnamese Youth Development Center and AKA Don Bonus kind of happened at the same time. I was asked to teach a summer workshop there, and video workshop to kids, and I think there was like 15 or 16 of them. And when I first walked in, you have to kind of contextualize that time. That time, there was a magazine cover of Time magazine that had just come out called The Asian American Model Minority. And basically what the article was saying is all minorities should be like Asian American. You understand what I'm saying? Like we don't get into trouble with the law. We believe in education. We believe in hard work. Right. Look at how successful all the Asian Americans are. Right.
And this is about 1992.
This is like 1992. Right. And at the same point, it's also the period of Rodney King. Right. And so I opened the door. It's a small, tiny little room. Everybody's packed in. And these guys are they're the furthest thing from the model minority. They're loud. They're brash. They're streetwise, they're smart, some of them are doing terribly in school, others are actually doing well. But they were anything but the quiet, reserved Asian American. And at that point, just right then, I was like, okay, this is interesting. Okay. And And what was great at the time was that it was a very innovative youth center where both the executive director, Luella Lee, and the artistic director, Glaze Paredes, really wanted to expose these kids to as much of the arts as they could. So I was actually brought in to teach video. There was somebody, Perla Bunyan was brought in to teach dance. The guy at the Park and Rec next door, Keith Greer, African American, was brought in to teach theater. So they were having this huge multidisciplinary thing, and it started at 12 o'clock, and we ran until about 8 p.m. every day. It was that kind of that energy that I sort of picked up on was how became sort of the incubator for AKA Don Bonus. But it was done in conjunction with the youth center. So if any of you have seen the film, it's like almost all those people that are featured in a lot of the kids, they're Don's friends. They're VYDC kids. They were there that summer, you know, and even some of the teachers and counselors were working close with VYDC to make sure kids stayed in school and stuff. So it was very, very much a community endeavor. You understand what I'm saying? There were a lot of people that I could kind of call and say, hey, is Don okay? Is Don shooting? You know what I'm saying? People were all kind of overseeing the project.
Mm-hmm. And so you were teaching a summer workshop, and Don was in one of those workshops?
Right.
And so that's where you first met him.
And what struck me right away, when I say working class rather than master class, I'm not lying. I mean, I was making up exercises to keep the kids engaged. You understand what I'm saying? Like I didn't want to just like lecture, or I wanted them to kind of be able to see, experience what it's like to actually make a movie. And so I came up with these exercises that would actually, where it could be more instantaneous, because it was video back then. And it was all VHS or High 8. Those High 8 had just hit. And so one of the things, there were one of the big exercises that we did was would give a kid a camera to take it home, which was huge back then. It was a big deal, right? Like, wow, you're actually going to trust me to take the camera home. That was, you know, cameras even back then were about $2,500, cheap cameras. And so, but what I had them do is the cool thing with the analog cameras is every time you hit a red button, it actually pauses the camera. And that pause actually creates what's called an in-camera edit. And so what I would make them do is do a 5-minute exercise, show me your home, all by using the red button for an in-camera edit. So what was interesting about that is it sort of taught them beginning, middle, end, and it also enabled them to see a movie instantaneously, right? Like as soon as they finished it, they could watch it. You know?
Just rewind it, play it back, right?
Just rewind it and play it back, right? And so it was really cool. Like everybody was coming back with "Show Me Your Home" videos, you know, and it was like, and they were like, "Wow, it's a real movie." You know what I mean? Like, and it's hard to explain or imagine because of, you know, this is before iMovie and TikTok and all this other bullshit, right? And so anyway, Don, if you look back at when he goes home right after school and the opening of the movie, some of those images in there are from his original "Show Me Your Home."
Oh,
okay. And some of that track is actually live too. You see what I'm saying? And so at that point, I'm like, we're on to something. You know what I mean? It's like I had never seen anything like this. And that kind of intimacy and that kind of honesty and that kind of access. I knew as a quote unquote professional, I could never get that. You know what I'm saying? I would never have, I wouldn't be able to get it.
And I know from, you know, having worked with you, I mean, that wasn't just Don. It was a lot of other a lot of the other youth that were coming through the center over this span of time, right? And
Yeah.
I'm curious. Let me go. Sorry, just look. I mean, so you had met Don. He worked in the summertime. The film starts when he's first going to school. So it's pretty short amount of time before he starts the school year then.
Yeah, I mean, we did not. One of the cool things with this is we did not break rhythm. You see what I'm saying? So it's like we finished. We actually had a community screening, and I have to admit it was like the best screening I've gone to. I had gone to a lot of film festivals and stuff, but this one was wild. You know, I mean, it was pretty crowded, but people were just yelling at the screen and they kind of intermixed it with dance and theater, and it was like super exciting. And my feeling was I wanted to kind of park there for a while, and so I did. I talked to both Luella Lee, the executive director, and Glades Paredes, the artistic director, and I said, what about if, we run a year-round program? But what I also want to do is I want to do a longer format film. And then we talked about possible people, and it was Glades, who really affirmed that Don would actually be the perfect subject. What's ironic about Don is, one reason why he got chosen was because he was very open. In many ways, he was not your typical male TL kid. They were much more macho, and you know what I'm saying. In fact, even when he did the Show Me Your Home movie, the dudes are all like making fun of him, right? You understand what I'm saying? But it was because of that I think Glades and I were like, it'd be good to kind of get that perspective where somebody's actually very open about their insecurities rather than trying to kind of cover them up.
And actually, you mentioned the TL, so the Tenderloin in San Francisco. Can you describe what that neighborhood, what that community is, just briefly, because people may not be familiar with it.
Traditionally, it's Skid Row. Yeah, and it's called the Tenderloin because, the cops supposedly eat steak there because they're on the take, right? The misconception, I think, is like when I first came to San Francisco was that it was very African American, but by the time I got there in the early 90s it was interesting because you would hear news reports from print, from anything they continue to portray it as an African American neighborhood, which couldn't be further from the truth. When I was there, it was actually 65% Southeast Asian families, and they were all, a lot of them were in Section 8 housing, and so they were intermixed with a huge homeless population, a drug addiction population, and just sort of thrown in there.
It's kind of like a really, really densely populated neighborhood. A lot of SRO hotels, studio apartments, that kind of thing.
And so these families would have like 10, 15 people crammed into a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. In all honesty, the geography worked for us because the kids there was no parents waiting outside in their cars to pick them up and drop them off like you see at all these, youth centers or schools. They just walked there. You know what I mean? Like 5 minutes away. If parents were pissed at their kids, they could walk there too and just, come and yell at, you know what I'm saying? It was very, very, the geography was very cool. And these kids knew the geography. I mean, they, I could, like, you learn very quickly where to walk, where not to walk. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're working with these youth in the summertime. They're using cameras. I just want to talk briefly about the technology. Just show a few pictures of what. Just because folks out there, for the younger folks, they may not know some of the tech. Don is using a like a Sony Hi8 Handycam. There's kind of like little Hi8 tapes. I don't know if this is the exact camera,
that's a little bit newer model.
Okay, that's what I found on Google Images. Yeah. And so these are kind of like these. So if people know what a VHS is, and you can see in these images like what a Hi8 tape is like in comparison. And I thought this picture was funny because you got a CD and some USB keys that are also legacy formats now. So and then I do want to talk about the film specifically, but this idea of using this technology specifically for this film to not only so you have this group of young people who have these stories to tell. It's access you could never get, and then how did the kind of camcorder technology work into that, and where did you get the idea for that?
Okay, so I try to tell it's a long answer, but okay. The idea did not come from me. The idea came from this filmmaker named Wayne Wang, who probably everybody knows. He directed Joy Luck Club and Made in Manhattan and blah 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 blah. I used to work with him, and we were in Hong Kong in the late 80s, I think, or early 90s, 1990. We're working on a film, and his wife had actually bought a Hi8 camcorder, like when it first came out. And he was just blown away by not only the picture, because the first time they kind of separated the signal a little bit. But the big thing was that it had a microphone input. So you could actually plug a microphone in. So for the first time, you could actually, you didn't have to hear the motor of the camcorder.
Yeah, it's not just an onboard mic.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So he was the one that said we should make a movie with this thing, and it was his whole, deal. What in many ways he was correct, because it was easy for anybody to use. You just had to hit the red button. It had autofocus. It was like anything manual, it was like such a pain in the ass to use. You just forgot about it. And then number two, it's like, just kind of figuring out how to get decent sound. What I did was I took those old hammerhead mics that you saw newscasters use because they don't require battery. And I had this sound guy named Curtis Choi make these cables that could go from a mini to an XLR. And then we would teach everybody to sort of hand hold the mic while they were shooting. So it was a two-handed kind of deal.
Yeah, and you see Don holding a mic sometimes in the film.
Right.
And also those mics are like nearly unbreakable, right?
They're unbreakable. Yeah. I mean, they're a good weapon. You know what I mean? So that's that. But it's the let's see, the protocol of the storytelling, it actually reverts back to the old film format. And so the way we constructed that film, and and all the films I've worked on is basically a very slow, laborious process, which I think is very different today. Miko may be able to address this later, but because digital has changed everything, it's so quick now. Back then, even though you shot on high 8, you could not edit on high 8. So we had to do select takes and transfer that to what's called the Beta SP format. And then from the Beta SP format, we had to transfer that to a 3/4 inch format so that we could do what's called offline editing with time code and a window dub, right? Everything was one step at a time. So, for example, what I did is Don would shoot. He would give me the footage weekly. We would go through it, and then that whole week I would log the footage by hand log everything. And so once we started logging stuff, then what I did is, as time went on, I started to kind of categorize it into 3 specific sections: family and home, school, and friends. Those were the 3 major themes. And I began to kind of categorize the footage into those. And then based off of that, I would then take the high 8 tapes and create submasters of them. So I didn't transfer all of them. We couldn't afford it, right? And so there was an expensive post-production house that actually could do that transfer. I had to actually go in at midnight. And so I'd go in at midnight and work until 6 a.m. transferring that high 8 specifically to that 3/4 inch professional edit format.
Like
and then
transferring your selects to that. Mm-hmm.
Right, right. So essentially Don shot like, I don't know, 60, 70 hours worth of footage. The select to Beta SP was actually about 40 hours, 35 to 40 hours. So we were able to cut it in half. Mm-hmm. Based off of that, I then Don and I actually worked closely together for, I think, about 4 or 5 months. And we created what's called an assembly. An assembly is there's no coverage. It's just, you're just chunking together scenes that you think have the potential of making it in the film. And that first assembly, which I'm really sad I can't find it anymore, but it was a 15-hour assembly. And back then, I was kind of, like anybody, when you're a little younger, you're cocky and you think you know everything. And I got all excited when I saw that 15-hour assembly, and I thought, Ken Burns was really hot at the time. He directed Civil War and all those, in my opinion, like bloated epics, right? But I'm like, well, if he could do it, I could do it, right? And so I would say I had a pitch where this was actually going to be 1 year of Don's life, but it was going to be told by months. So it would be an 8 to 9 part series. Mm-hmm. And I like it. I thought I was really on to something until I realized like nobody had any interest in that, and they were so put off by the handheld footage, and it was like, it's not gonna work.
Well, I mean, I was curious then, actually, because was the structure of a high school year always the concept going in? Like as soon as you said, "Hey, Don, we're gonna shoot this and we're gonna record your senior year," basically. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what I've learned, and to be honest with you, working with Wayne, it's like you kind of got to know when to stop shooting. You understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like I think you have to create certain rules for your films, And so one of the things that was really great in talking to Don and Glades before we stopped shooting or started shooting was that if the through line was going to be very simple. He needed to pass every class in order to graduate. If he didn't, he wasn't. So to me, that was the setup, and that the ending is he's either going to graduate or he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I'm saying? We did not really initially intend to include that picnic scene, but by happenstance, we're lucky that we ended up it ended up getting shot. I didn't even log the picnic scene in the original, in my original logging. Mm-hmm. I ended up logging it later. Mm-hmm. So yeah. But that I think it's good to have that. It's the same thing with when I was with Refugee. When I did Refugee, the third in the trilogy, it was like, okay, they're gonna go to Cambodia. When they come back, that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like a natural beginning, middle,
yeah,
and end.
Yeah. And then as a filmmaker, you have to figure out how to tell the story within that parameter. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I think I've been involved with films where you could keep shooting, and you have 5 endings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're shooting, you're seeing things weekly, and you're starting to put things together. I know I worked with you, edited Refugee, and then we also made this Spencer Nakasako trilogy, which we were able to find a few behind the scenes or things that didn't make the cut. But I remember that when we did, we had a really hard time finding any original footage from AKA, but the stuff that we did see was incredible. I mean, very different in a lot of ways. It's kind of like the Frederick Wiseman high school film,
Right.
So you're editing it, you're assembling it. There's something that is really interesting. There's, I think that there's a perception of the film that's like, oh, Don is just shooting all these things, but there's a lot of craft that goes into it and identifying elements of storytelling that can work, or components that can work together. So one thing is that, and I did some research and listening to your director's commentary. So there's 3 things that you identified in terms of the visual elements. So there's subjective. So this is what you called it, where it would be Don's point of view, and we'll show some screen grabs of that. So kind of a subjective image from Don's point of view. There's an example of objective where actually Don is on. So that's a frame of when early in the film when Don is showing his home, nobody's home, and that's very much POV. He's holding the camera, talking.
Right.
There's the objective where he's given the camera to somebody and he's talking to the camera,
right?
Or they're shooting something else that he's in the scene, and then you have the monologues, right? So were these things that you had planned out, or there were things that were coming out in the footage that you started identifying, and then it was kind of like you were unlocking something that's like, oh, these are elements that will work together,
right?
Because I think one of the things about the film is that it's not just that POV. It is, you do see Don in the film quite a bit, whether it's through the monologues or the more objective things. But those objective shots are happening live, right? They're not. They are also have that really immediate quality to it too.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with this project, as probably a lot more than anything I've worked on, is everything had an immediacy to it. It just happened. There was no let's talk about this, and shall we frame the lamp in or out, or you know what I mean? It was like, it kind of cut through all that pretentious filmmaking crap that, you know what I mean? That sometimes it's like, get the shot already, But no, there's 2 things that were planned. One is the monologues were planned. Those are, that was because that's the first thing that I had the kids do when they took the camera home, was to talk to the camera for 5 minutes straight. And I don't care what they talk about. It could be anything. And if they weren't going to if they're uncomfortable saying anything, then say nothing, but keep it running for at least 5 minutes with no edits. And so I kind of, like the kids really responded to that. And especially Don. So I wanted to kind of keep that going, and to see where he took it. He actually used it a lot. Like some of his monologues were literally an hour long. And so that was one. The subjective thing came out of Show Me Your Home, and it's just an extension. Show me your school, show me your friends, show me your, you understand what I'm saying? The objective stuff was pure happenstance. That's sort of the nature of the TL. It's like some people just grab the camera from Don, you know what I mean? Grabbing the mic, doing impromptu interviews with people, all of that stuff was just all freeform. And it was kind of trying to figure out how to make it all work. I have to say, initially, when I was trying to be a filmmaker on this, which was the biggest mistake is, was when, because bad ideas came out. But my whole feeling initially was I wanted to construct the film so that you never saw Don. So it was a total POV film, and you would not see him until the end when he was with his graduation gown and he was standing in front of it. That's the one time. That's the time that you would actually see him. And then he hits the remote, and then it goes to black, and that would end the movie. So I love that idea, and that's all it turned out to be, was a bad idea. When you watch the movie, even me, I'm like, who is this guy?
So you had a cut of that then?
Yeah. I have a lot of cuts. I mean, tons of cuts. And then there's another one where, again, it was what you saw was what you get kind of version. So it was like his monologues were actually totally filmed, right? He would be on camera. We actually took a lot of those monologues and we put it in under the footage, right? Under the subjective footage. But I had a rule like, no, we can't do that. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then those were like, when I showed it to a couple of people, it'd be like an 8-minute monologue that I thought was like, wow, this is really powerful. And they're like asleep, right? So even though it was a very moving thing, it was like, oh man, the monologue, I mean, I think tops is like, the longest one I think is like 1:58 or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to ask about that. It's like, this film is actually like, it's not very long, but so much happens in it, and it's like, it's really epic in a way. I mean, there's a real like efficiency to the storytelling. Mm-hmm. But it made me wonder, was that something that did you have to keep it to an hour because there was like PBS obligations to that, or like if you can talk about was that hour long a necessity basically?
No. I mean, to be honest with you, nobody gave a shit about this movie. You know what I'm saying? There was no interest. I mean, it was too out there. It was too odd. It was, and people were also like asking, like, why am I showing like the bad Asian Americans? You understand? I mean, it was like, there was a lot of reasons to if I listened, to not make this movie. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So no, what was interesting to me is the better the movie was getting, in my opinion, the tighter it was, you know, and again, starting off thinking like flabby, let the scenes play out, you know, take an anthropological approach of seeing everything in the frame and none of, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like getting over all that. You know what I mean? And it's like, and learning that you know, when I was teaching, I used to tell this to my students, and I'm not sure every one of them got it, but the subject and the story is more important than the filmmaker. That's what I learned in this. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you got to do justice to your characters. You got to do justice to the story, you know? And if you could, for me personally, was succumbing to and really understanding to try to create a seamless storytelling structure so that the viewer could just watch the movie, you know what I mean, and not say, "Oh wow, this guy's a great film." Oh wow, you know what I mean, and being okay with that. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it is interesting to me, and in that. And in many ways, it should be a compliment. And I'd be curious to talk to Miko about it too. But initially, when the film came out, I mean, people didn't think I did anything. They just thought I gave Don the camera, you know. And then and on at the beginning, I was like, "Damn, what a," you know.
All these years we put in, right?
It's like, you know, it's like, what did you do? What did you do anyway? It's like, oh man, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, you want to take him in the back, you know?
Well, it is definitely one of the misconceptions about the film is that it's like, it's so raw and so, it's so, you know, like, it's this teenager's life, you know? But that there is so much like craft that's in it, you know, because you got out of your own way, right?
Yeah, I think the craft, like, film geeks kind of get the craft. But it was interesting to me about when it did come out, about the reaction and how people also jump to conclusions without ever even having any curiosity to ask. You know what I'm saying? Like,
in terms of how the film was made and how it was put together.
Yeah, everything, right? It's sort of like, let's just jump all over this shit, right? And you know, I mean, I'm pretty easy to find. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody, like, you know, people are writing stuff and it would be like, you know, is this really a Cambodian American perspective? Because there was Spencer Nakasako was a JA and Don Bonus is a CA, and so where's the balance between CA and JA? And I'm like, it got nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? Like, why are you guys wasting your time having this chat room conversation? You know. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you addressed a lot of my my questions too, which is really well. And you know, despite like you know, talking about like getting it tighter, there are a couple of elements that I mean, it's always kind of dangerous to talk about the things that you kind of had a hard time letting go in terms of like elements of it. But I think, you know, as a filmmaker, there's always things that you really liked about a film, but it just didn't work. And I feel like the Gamblers crew is an element that there's a real like affinity for, but it just, you know, it kind of said a little bit of about Don's world, but ultimately it wasn't really part of the story. Was there a lot more with them?
Yeah. I mean, the Gamblers was what's fascinating too about this is what the people who are involved with the film had to say about scenes that they would want or not want. You know what I'm saying? And so Don was the most where what he would really wanted, and we had to cut out. And it was my favorite scene in the movie too, but it's his senior prom. And it's a great scene. You know, it shows him putting on a tux and he doesn't know how to do it, and his brother has to help him, and then actually the gamblers, you know, pick him up, and it's like that's his limo, right? Is Michael Mack, you know, and so Michael Mack picks him up, and he shows up at his date, and the girl opens the door, and Don's shooting her, and then she just slams the door in his face. You know what I mean? And so, you know, and then he films the whole thing, and you see it's a great scene where they go out to eat at this fancy restaurant called the Waterfront. I don't know if you remember the Waterfront. Anyway, yeah, all the gamblers are there. There's like 18 of them, 20 of them all eating there, and then they go to the thing, and it's a great scene. It's like Don loose, Don having fun, and being a teenager. You understand what I'm saying? And I think Don was kind of like, it's a chance for people to see me, you know, like I'm just not sad all the time. You know, like, I'm just not going through terrible stuff all the time. The problem with it is that it's a senior prom, and so audiences know exactly when senior prom lands in a school year. The only place for that was after Touch's, you know, the hearing thing, right? And so it's kind of this downer with Touch, and then the upper, you know, is this prom. It just didn't.
The tone would be totally off, right?
And so what we do is we actually go to the composition test, which is, you know, this is a Wayne Wang thing too. Wayne Wang is like, Act 3, man, you got to get going. You know, it's like Act 3 should be like 10 minutes shorter than your other two acts, right? It's like the audience is going to leave, is what he's saying. And so it was a real teeth puller to get rid of that. But it is like, I actually watched it with the TL kids, a cut. And I could just see, even though it was the prom, their reaction was kind of like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it was something and just lifting that, it kicked the story a lot, moved the story a lot forward. So that's why you lose stuff. You understand what I'm saying? I kind of feel like today everybody wants to make a feature. I guess because I don't know why, but everybody wants, and I'm like, and so a lot of, again, it'd be great to talk to Miko about it, but I'm bored. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, this film doesn't need to be 80 minutes. This film doesn't need to be 75 minutes. I mean, you know, but, you know, anyway.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that little kind of cutting room floor material. And actually, I am going to bring Miko on, who is joining us. Hi, Miko. Oh, we got to unmute you.
Can you hear
Miko.
me? Hi.
Yeah, you sound good. Can you tell us where you're joining us from?
Mexico City.
All right.
Well,
thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm feeling like such a fanboy right now, and student of this masterclass.
So Miko's first feature film, No Data Plan, is a descendant of AKA Don Bonus in a way, with its video diary approach. But like many relatives, it looks very different and is unique in itself, balancing a fraught personal narrative against a backdrop of a young undocumented man making a cross-country train trip in a Trump America. In an essay for the Rotterdam Film Festival, Miko wrote about his reactions to AKA Don Bonus and selected it for an online screening as part of their Unleashed program earlier in 2020. So fortunately for us, we have you two here. And when we met a couple days ago, it was the first time you two had ever met. So I'm glad to have you both here, and that's I guess one of the benefits of having this digital presentation. So, so yeah, I just want to hear from Miko. We'll talk a little bit about when you first saw AKA Don Bonus, and what was some of your thoughts about it.
Yeah, it just came to me right now, actually, as I was backstage. So I came across this film while I was working at a post-production house called Flash Cuts in Atwater Village in Los Angeles, and this is Walt Louis' place.
Yes.
And then so I was tasked with ripping this trilogy DVD so they can make Yuri can cut together a reel for CamFest. And then so this was in recent years, but so I was ripping the DVD, and then I had no idea about this film. Maybe it was recommended a while ago, but it had completely missed me. I missed it, regrettably. But I was like, it was on a window ripping, and I was doing whatever work I was doing, probably like on Instagram or something. And then it completely sucked me in. And I think I was, as I was watching it, I was trying to hold back tears as I was writing invoices throughout the day. Where I was just like there pretending like I'm doing my work, but I'm actually completely sucked into this movie. And that night, I took it home. I made a copy of it for myself, of course. I brought it home to my girlfriend at the time. Her dad is a boat person, a boat refugee from Vietnam. Right. And then she grew up in San Jose. I grew up in Union City and Fremont, so both from the Bay Area. And I was like, hey, like this is, there's never been like this type of story told with people who are like who we grew up with, like in the Bay Area, this Asian American youth in the 90s, but not, as you say, like the model minority type, or like it's nowhere near Crazy Rich Asians. It's the Asian gangsters that we grew up with. And then I was blown away by this. Hold on, I just took this screenshot of, I wonder if I could drag it into the chat or something. Here.
Maybe, yeah, put it in the chat and maybe we can throw it up in a second. We'll see. They'll throw it up, I think.
Did you get it or no? Hold on. I get it on my phone. Anyway, I was completely blown away, and then I feel like representation matters so much in this sense, and it's not completely like it does have to do. It only begins with race, but then it goes so much further because it's so specific in this film, and then it meant so much for me to see like this similar environment which I grew up with and similar issues that I also grew up with. I don't know, being surrounded with this type of community, and also sort of having baggage of myself being an immigrant and having the baggage of that growing up. And then for me being an undocumented immigrant, I recalled sort of the struggle of school, and then like I want to send you this picture so bad. It's like me as a troublemaker in like 7th grade with like spiky hair.
Yeah.
And I totally relate to this person, Don Bonus, in that sense. And I always related to how he would talk about school and the type of narration that was here. I came from more of an experimental film background, and I knew about Chris Marker, Agnes Varda, Jonas Mekas, before I knew of this film, before I knew of Don Bonus. So to see this format of the video diary, the personal sort of essay film, being through the lens of someone who looked like me and who grew up in this type of environment was incredibly inspiring for me. But I found film as a form of continuing to be a troublemaker, and that's why I got into experimental film. And I was wondering, let's see, what am I? I'm just kind of like geeking out, actually, just talking to you, and I'm just really want to celebrate this film and celebrate the trilogy and the sort of accomplishments of what this film is and its effect on my practice. But I was making films, and then I think when I saw this, I wish I saw it earlier. Could you talk about? Now we got to ask a question.
I have a question that kind of like links the two films. If you need a little bit of time, so I was able to watch your film No Data Plan, Miko, and one of the things I kind of noticed with both films is that they are both very intimate, and the camera is a companion for both Don and for you in your film. Maybe both of you can talk about the camera as a companion in each of your films.
Go ahead, Miko.
Right. So for No Data Plan, it's a film that I shot on the Amtrak train for 3 days. And the reason why it's titled No Data Plan is because at the time I didn't have a data plan on my phone. It's because I was paranoid about the current ICE enforcement in the U.S., sort of tracking all immigrants, and this really heightened time in the Trump administration when that was happening, and they're able to intercept immigrants coming home from work or on the way to work or just knowing where they are. So I didn't have a data plan. And I thought that I had to go to New York for school. I was going to Bard for my MFA. And then I was taking the train because I didn't have the legal documents to fly at the time. And so I got on the train. I was expecting there to be Wi-Fi. And they didn't have Wi-Fi. I swear it was advertised that they would have Wi-Fi and that I'd have something to do for 3 days. But I didn't have anything to do for 3 days, so the camera literally became my companion. And it was the object that kept me occupied. And I had no idea that I was making a film or a feature film. I was just filming what I found interesting. Yeah. It's my travel companion.
I think that Don thing is true and not, it's a little overblown. Yes, I did give him something to talk to, but it was also an anchor, he hated having to hide it when he was in Sunnydale, whenever he was coming home, because he was scared he was going to get jacked. And there were times he was just sick and tired of shooting, all the time. I mean, you have to understand, he was doing it for 9 months. And so there were times that he didn't do it. And again, it was not just me, but the relentlessness of the community, where people would see him and they would basically say, "Hey, where's the camera?" You know what I mean? And there's tons of outtakes where you can hear people talking and saying, I saw you the other day, you didn't have the camera, how come? You know what I mean? And they're just teasing him, but he became, at Galileo, he kind of became known as Don Bonus the cameraman, because he had it so much. What was great about it was, this is way back, we received no permission from anybody. We didn't talk to the school district. We didn't talk to and so but we got all these pretty great video releases, which are semi-legal, where people would say, so what are you filming? And Don would say, I'm shooting this for Channel 9, KQED, right? The local PBS station. And because I told him it was, we're going to try to get it on PBS after we're done. I didn't know if we had a chance, and so he told everybody. It's like, so that a teacher would say, why are you filming this thing? Like, I'm filming this for KQED Channel 9. And they're like, yeah, right. You know what I mean? And so he'd say, is it okay to film you? And then, yeah, sure, go ahead, right? But when it finally did come out, people were shocked. Anyway.
Cool. Yeah.
Can I add one quick thing? Walt Louis and I are really good friends.
Oh, crazy.
This is great. Walt Louis owns Flash Cuts.
Right.
And so yeah. I've done a ton of, I digitized, he was nice enough to digitize most of my masters at there a year or two ago. But yeah, he's a San Francisco boy and longtime editor, right? Yeah. So great connection.
So super great. Can't believe, like, I don't know, I'm thinking back to that day of work and then and us coming full circle. It was really nice to meet in the form of this film and then to now talk to you here about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you get a chance to think of your question, Miko?
I do have it. There's this really one of the most iconic lines, I think, for me from this film, but in general, it was this sequence between Don and his brother, and they're talking about reality. Mm-hmm. It's so fascinating. He says, his brother says, because his brother says, this is reality. It's not a movie. After 30 seconds, you'll resolve the problem. This goes on 24 hours a day. And then Don asks, what is reality? And then his brother answers, reality is stuck here with people like you. And it was completely amazing, this sequence, because it's this sort of interrogation of the documentary obsession with reality for me, but also these different forms of reality. And then what I find with the trilogy is like is a different type of reality. It's like keeping it real, in this sense of like authenticity of the streets, and then like people talking as they do, and then I know it feels real. I know it's real because everyone's keeping it very real, and it feels so I wanted to ask you sort of like what your take with your approach. What is like reality for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, what was interesting to me is working on starting at BYDC in the Tenderloin. It changed my perspective right away, in the sense that people were so open, right, to talk about whatever, and what was interesting about it was, I think the technology at the time was super helpful. I'm curious to ask you after this whether the technology is still helpful. I'm curious about that. Because back then it was fresh. It was really, I mean, for people to have camcorders back then was a big deal. It's like, so not only did we film like AKA Don Bonus, but we're filming weddings, we're filming funerals, we're doing a lot of community documentation. So we're getting a lot of reality, you know what I mean? The stuff that audiences would consider boring, but for those community members, it means everything to see your kid graduate from high school. You know what I'm saying? Um, so I think that there was this energy, this buzz, this whole thing about, you know, that we can express ourselves with this, um, and the fact that back then it was accessible, it was small, so it was easy to give to people. Now I'm curious whether that accessibility works against filmmaking. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, because people weren't so knowledgeable about film, they weren't so knowledgeable how things could get put together. There weren't that many outlets. You know, they never saw themselves on screen. You know, like you're saying now. You know, I'm curious whether the accessibility works in the opposite direction.
Right.
I've heard some filmmakers that are working with youth, and they have the kids film on their cell phones, and they're not going there. They're self-censoring, you know, because they say, I don't want to reveal that part of my life to you, because there's so much baggage, where back then it was very fresh, it was very, very new.
Right. Yeah, and that's an interesting thought where because video is so accessible now, everyone can, in a sense, everyone does make moving images. But in Don Bonus' case, it was sorry. How should I put this? I think what's interesting is that there's different types of screens, and then you're making a movie. It may be for television, but you're making a film, and it also goes to film festivals. Now there are tiny screens, which for the purposes of being broadcasted for the day, or I don't know, a very temporal screen that can just be broadcasted and forgotten.
Right.
Also, it relates to one's sort of image of themselves, or what they want to portray of themselves. So there's sort of like a branded, you can brand yourself to whatever type of image you want and keep up with that brand, as long as producing content for that screen. But what I find really empowering about cinema as a medium is that, for me at least, it's a medium to process one's thoughts and one's problems. It's not just like the act of making a film, and the problem lies within the getting it done or making a captivating story. It's the actual, you're dealing with your own reality, or I don't know, you're dealing with a reality. You're dealing with conflicts, and in this case, family conflicts, and a lot of baggage. And in this film, what is really great about it is that Don Bonus is, you could see the thought process of a year and how one grows. Yeah, so I don't know. I just wanted to respond to these types of. I on that note, like you keep saying that this sort of separation of generations, that you're like not up on the times, but I think it's still a very like forward thinking film.
Yeah, well, I think that because I think, well, for me personally, I think when anybody is really trying to sort of tell that community-based story, that community-based struggle, that don't have simple answers, that don't have simple solutions, that aren't looking for, heroes and villains in a black and white situation. I do think that that's the type of work I'm attracted to. like I have a pretty good radar now. I can tell when somebody's actually spent some time in a community or in the hood or knows their subjects really, really well. And if they can show life is complicated. And if they could show those complications, I think all the better. I think, yeah, anyway, that's
No,
it. Yeah.
totally. I think it's important to see this too, the sort of complications and self-representation.
Mm-hmm.
And in Don Bonus's story, the conflicts that arise from telling your own story, which implicates the people around you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then so with with this quote that I brought up earlier, it was from his brother
Mm-hmm.
saying like, "Why are you always filming? Like, if you give me more money, if you give me some money, then I'll tell you the truth."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a power dynamic with making films, and even when you're telling your own story, yeah, it's very complicated. And so in this sense, like, I don't know, I like this kind of story because the protagonist is there's flaws in everybody, there's flaws in the system, and I like that. I don't know, he's the way he's telling the story does not make him to be the victim, but also does not make him to be like amazing. It's just like goes home, he talks about how much school sucked, and that's just as real as it gets.
Yeah. Well, what was interesting to me too is the different reaction that we'll get from different audience. You understand what I'm saying? Like if you played this for sort of the generic film festival audience, people were crying in certain scenes, really, and they felt really bad for Don, like especially like when he gets robbed, and he's calling the police. You know what I'm saying? That whole scene. I mean, not to be whatever, but when I played that to the kids at the Vietnamese Youth Development Center, when he gets robbed, I mean, it's like a comedic scene. The kids are all laughing, right? They're like, you got robbed. They took your soy sauce. You don't even have a soy sauce. And then when he says, the black guy says, "Hey, man, I got your TV. You want to see it?" I mean, it's just like the place is just dying in laughter. And so you play that versus the film festival. You understand what I'm saying? I think I was talking to you guys about this too. It's like, the toughest screening I ever had was at 8 a.m. at Juvenile Hall and playing this. And, I would say 75% of the audience was African American, right? And so their whole reaction to this thing and they knew Sunnydale, because this is Juvenile Hall in San Francisco. And then you contrast that with when it played in Berlin, a total heady audience. And to be honest with you, the Q&A, I think like the first question, I can't remember what it was. It was like, I couldn't even, it was way out there. Like, was I thinking of King Lear when I went in the construction of When Dawn Comes Home for the first time? And it's like, I was like not a great student, you know what I mean? So I never read King Lear, And so it was like fascinating to just kind of see this film working on different levels, and then seeing how academia was using it. There was something kind of satisfying about it. It was all not intentional to make this accessible to Berlin. It was not intentional to make this accessible at Juvenile Hall. It just happened. You know what I'm saying?
Totally. I gotta share this. Check this out. This is me and
Oh, got the spikes.
got the spikes.
How much gel? How much gel is in there?
It was a lot. It was like this big can of gel. But but that was the look at the time, in the early 2000s. And then back then, if you're Asian American in the Bay Area, you're like you're you're a drag racer, you're a break dancer, a DJ,
Yeah.
graffiti artist. Anyway, I was a bad student too, and I didn't have any motivation to go to college because I was undocumented and I wouldn't have the opportunity to.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like you talk about, to hear you talk about like academia and how this plays in academia. And how it makes me think of how my films also play and circulate in cultural institutions. And then in contrast, how sort of the educational system has failed Don Bonus here and failed so many people. So I don't know. How do you feel about? Can you continue talking sort of about, like, I mean, this film circulates in a sort of Asian American studies context, and perhaps that's why I didn't come across it, because I was into experimental films. But it's interesting how I never didn't see it in that context. Because for me, it's an experimental film too. And then, so yeah, I don't know. There's these divisions and institutions. There's the sort of like fascination with these stories, and how it sort of feeds an institutional machine. And you teach, and I do a lot of these festivals. So how do you feel about films of this nature sort of like circulating within academia and the institutional world?
Right. I have to say, I've done a lot of stuff in my life, you know what I'm saying? But the one thing I think everybody's talking about today is branding. What's your brand, right? And then they know you, so it's like Spence is an activist, or Spence is a mentor, or Spence is, you know what I'm saying? I think if I failed at anything, it's in terms of some kind of job security. I don't fit anywhere. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not being regretful. I'm just being honest. I went to Berlin, with this film, and I saw a whole bunch of famous filmmakers there. You know what I'm saying? And they were getting, tons of experimental filmmakers in Forum and Panorama. I kind of feel like people saw me as a one-trick pony, that I kind of got lucky more than I was smart. Do you understand what I'm saying? Which is okay. I never pretended to be an experimental filmmaker. The same thing with academia. I mean, they may use the film, and I have taught, but I don't have a doctorate. I have no terminal degree. I don't know anything about film studies. So I'm easily expendable. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, well, it's if I have anything, it's this guy that works with kids. You know what I'm saying? And I think where I do get a little pissed is that their arrogance or their elitism, for a lot of them, think they're better than those kids, and I don't see them as better than those kids. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like sometimes I'll say, oh, I used to do this exercise with the TL kids. Maybe we should try that. And they're like, nah, that works with those kids, but these are MFA students. It's like, well, who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Like, so what, right? And I think if I have any kind of, it's nice to be able to kind of be included, but I think that a lot of times my work and myself, we're not at home at these places. Does that make sense to you, kind of?
Right. No, totally. No, I think like the kids that you have worked with are some of my favorite filmmakers of all time.
Like Aaron Collier.
But I wonder, like, with Don Bonus, has he continued after the film? Like, was there interest in continuing filmmaking?
Yeah, there was. He actually, he was actually, Don was given quite a few opportunities, and I can't remember exactly who, but somebody actually gave him a chunk of money to make a film, and he wanted to make a dramatic about the Khmer Rouge, and he bought one of those Hi8 camcorders, but it was at that time was called a Hi8 Pro, where it actually had VU meters, 2 mic inputs, and it had VU meters on it. It wasn't a cheap camera, and he pretty much wanted to make it without me. Do you understand? And understandably, he wants to kind of do it on his own, but it was, to do a dramatic narrative, Khmer Rouge, very little money, right? He spent most of the money on the equipment. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was some pretty great scenes that they made because he was also making it with all his friends, and they actually, he cheated Cambodia. He shot a lot of it in Golden Gate Park. Right?
That's amazing. I want to see this film.
And so I only kind of saw outtakes, and like he would screen some footage with me, but it's a grind. This is a grind, and one of the things I try to tell people is you can't do it yourself. You need to build a team. You need to build a core group of people that you can rely on. I mean, me at least. Do you understand what I'm saying? That can keep you going day after day after day, because it does become a drudgery. And I think what happened with Don was that there was an expectation. The expectation was too high. You see what I'm saying? Like, what's next? People would ask him, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I think it just kind of ended up getting to him. And what he did was he sort of moved away from the Bay Area, and he actually moved down to Long Beach and kind of got lost in that Cambodian community, because I think Long Beach and Lowell, Massachusetts are the biggest Cambodian communities. Yeah. And basically he kind of started to live the square Don Bonus life.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thanks for actually bringing that question in, Miko, because that was one of the questions that came up about what Don is up to, and that kind of thing. You know, it has been 25 years since the film, and also Spencer, you're saying like you know, just bringing it back to this is not a master class, this is about the work, right? So we do have another question, and I do want to wrap pretty soon. So one of the questions, but we kind of answered a couple of them already, actually. So throughout the talk, and also Miko was able to fold that one in there. But did you get any pushback from any of the subjects because of the way they were represented in the film? If so, how did you manage those reactions? Maybe we'll keep it to just specifically this film with AKA. I think there was some stuff, particularly with Touch and how he was in the film.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest reaction was, well, it was a 2-day process. So we screened the film for the whole bonus clan. The one sticking point was the mom had one request, and she wanted us to cut out the shots with Touch's handcuffs. She did not mind seeing Touch in juvenile hall, but any shot with the handcuffs she wanted out. And you know, and I did my best to try to convince her, but she was pretty adamant no. But ultimately, there were two people that changed her mind, and one was Dawn, and the other one was actually Touch, and because by that time Touch was out of the Pennsylvania, and he was back, and he had gotten his GED. And he was just basically told, and his mom basically said, that's how people are going to remember you. And he basically said that it was real, and he didn't care. I should mention at that time, too, the great little side story, Touch was got a job at that point. He was working for a law firm as like, you know, just an errand boy, right? But they were actually super excited when the film came out, you know. And so when it did get nominated for an Emmy, the crazy story is neither Don nor I went. We sent Touch. And so Touch was the guy who got the award.
That's awesome.
It's amazing.
And it was funny because he called and he said, "Hey, I'm here. Guess what? I got to pee next to Henry Kissinger."
The world works in funny ways, doesn't it? I want to wrap it up because we're kind of coming up on time now, but I was wondering if there's anything, you know, San Francisco to Mexico, if there's any last thoughts or last questions or comments or any for each other.
I just, for me, it's like, what are you working on, Miko, and what's up?
Yeah. No, it's interesting to have this conversation. You know, like, to hear sort of about Don Bonus also after making this film is interesting for me. It feels sometimes when you like making you're telling your own story, and then it's like, what's next, you know? And then I recently was watching a reading by Ocean Vuong, in which Ocean talks about the autobiography, in which Ocean hesitates on giving an autobiography because once one does, it's almost like you give it away.
Right.
So in the sort of demand for like another film or another story of yours, it gets it can be it's difficult in short. But in short, yeah, I left the States It became too much because of the immigration situation there.
Mhm.
And then I went to the Philippines, in which when I was watching your film Refugee, it felt very connected to my own story of going back and being overwhelmed by the amount of people I'm meeting, and then just all at the same time, and doing karaoke with the family also.
Aaron was really instrumental in cutting that scene.
I fought for it.
Yeah. I have to show you a cut at some point. I need you to give me that, to pass on this, like, okay, none of this like anthropological bullshit, like just get to act 3 or whatever.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. So that's all the time we have. I want to thank Spencer. I want to thank Miko for joining us from afar. I want to thank Jamie and Matt from Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Services. Our producers Mimi Vong and Josephine Cruz. And if you'd like to discuss more about this film or the rest of the festival, check out our film forum. And just remember that the festival is going on until November 19th, but you got to get your tickets today, so you can still have a little bit of room. And so please go and check out relation.com. So take care, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ciao.
Going to outro.